Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new edition of Low-Code Cafe, episode 82. Today, we'll have our very own Patrick showcasing us how to integrate a payment provider in Plantanet, and that will be the main topic for today. But in the meantime, to give a overview to new folks in this webinar joining today for the first time. This is a community event that we are doing every week on Wednesday at the same time. And it's a community event, meaning it's also about the product, about the support, the lessons that we learn on support, and the largest part of it, it's a hands-on session where we or people in our community showcase how to build real-life use cases with Plantanet. This event, as you noticed, is being recorded, so all past editions are on our YouTube channel, so then you can see a lot of very good content for training purposes and as well for referencing, going back to it. So make sure to subscribe. In addition to this event, there is another event that happens on Fridays, which is a community get-together. We call it Low-Code Campfire. And then there's also many other training videos that come from that session as well. So make sure to join on Fridays as well if you are not already. Okay. So as mentioned, the agenda for today. First, I will give you some updates regarding upcoming releases, and then we'll hear the stories from the trenches with Del Warner, our head of support, and finally the largest chunk, Patrick, which is a technical success manager in our team, will showcase how to integrate payment providers. So. Make sure to engage with us in any way you see fit during this webinar. There is the chat window, the Q&A, and so on. Awesome. So let's start with the product. So as many of you already know, 1.19 we launched the Bootstrap 5 with in experimental mode, and the plan is in 1.20 it will become the default view for everything. Of course, migration doesn't happen automatically, so we give people a chance to migrate one page at a time or one section at a time, because during the upgrade there might be some glitches, especially on custom UIs that will need to be addressed. We'll still keep Bootstrap 3 for a while. We haven't decided yet when it's going to be retreated, but now it will be retreated in a couple of releases. So I encourage you all to embrace Bootstrap 5 as soon as it's out. And even today, if you are on 1.19, it really helps us a lot to start using it and give us feedback, because this feedback will help make 1.20 even better. So this release, it's on schedule for now to go out as a beta first on March 18, and then the final release will happen at the end of the month on March 28. There's also a spring cleanup. We announced this for a couple of releases, so many features that we marked as obsolete will get removed in this release. So there is a list that I showed in this webinar in the past, and I'm sure Dale showed it a couple of times as well, where we document all the obsolete features and when they are going to be removed. And this list lives in our documentation site. And just to give you a perspective on what's coming, so the following release, 1.21, which will go out end of April, beginning of May. We are investing a lot now in simplifying the multi-environment and deployments feature in Plantanet. So that means a couple of angles we are looking at it. One is to be able to create new environments from existing environments more easily, but also the ability to deploy automatically between environments. So we avoid doing the manual deployments that we have today. And of course, looking at how we can roll back deployments and things like that. So everything that one would expect to find in a let's say, a development stack. There's another big thing that is happening with 121. We are switching more to using Docker, and actually Docker will become the default, let's say not the default, the preferred way to deploy Plant and App, because Docker opens the path for us for many big things. We made a plan internally to transition to .NET Core and Kubernetes for our platform and our infrastructure. This is a long-term plan that requires a lot of milestones to touch in between, but Docker is the critical, the essential part that we need to do first. So this will not affect customers that don't want to use it yet. It will still work as before, but the new some new capabilities like the multi-environment piece will only be available through Docker. So that is one thing to know. Cool. So that's it on my part. If there are no more questions, no questions, I would bring Dale to take over.
All right. There are no questions yet, so let's. Although I think some of those topics you just mentioned are interesting, and I suspect will generate some discussion over the next weeks and months.
Yes. Let's
start with links. I'm going to paste some things on the chat window, and these are various links that we'll probably talk about, but at some point here. But you mentioned Low-Code Campfire, and so there's a link to sign up for that. And on the obsolete features and their target removal dates, there's a link for that into our documentation. So that's where we're working from. Good. So a couple of things that we're seeing in support that I wanted to mention. We're into getting to a nice regular pattern with the product team to release hot fixes on typically, I think it's Tuesday that they go out. And so it gives me a chance to talk about them here on the Low-Code Cafe. One that's, I think, really quite interesting. This came out of a discussion that came up in Campfire. This first one about sync with URL. And I'm going to demonstrate that here in a second. But we had an issue where certain special characters were messing with our search when we were syncing with the URL. And so that's been fixed at this release. And you'll see that Plant and App customers will see that in the updates section. And it'll look just like this, sync with URL. There's a couple of more esoteric ones that I'll just mention. And you don't need to take these particularly unless this circumstance applies to you, but we had one, we offer a certain number of templates. And so people using our MailChimp template, we're getting the obsolete form of inject data instead of our set create or update token. So that has been updated. It's a very minor thing. And then we had a client with a particular issue with search that was addressed in this release as well. So some things, I mean, it's great to take them. There's no downside. You'll get these as part of the 5.20 release automatically. But if you're experiencing the issue, you can take those updates. So the listings one is pretty easy to demonstrate, and this is a system that hasn't been updated. And so if we were to look at, I'm sorry, let me close out my my editing here. So we have a number of records in a CRM system, and I have some records that have some special characters like the ampersand, %, hashtag, underscore. And so, for example, if we were to search for Dale and, we're getting all the records and that have Dale. And if we were to search for hashtag, we're getting all the records completely. These special characters, what you'll see if you look on the URL line up here, if I start typing Dale, we can see that we're searching for Dale, but when I started typing the ampersand, this didn't actually make it up into the line and isn't influencing the search. When we and then the one that I've been skipping altogether is searching for %, and it just sends our search into this nice little forever loading kind of a bar. So This is the behavior that that we've corrected. If this is a system, a different system that has this patch having been applied. So now if we search for Dale, we see these records, but as soon as I put an ampersand sign on, it's keying right into the record. Same thing with the underscore. And if we do a pound sign, we're getting right to that record instead of all records, and a percent sign in the same way, it's jumping right to the record. So a nice little enhancement to search for people who have data that have these special characters. If that circumstance applies to you, I would definitely apply that. And then, as I mentioned, those other two that are relevant only in certain conditions. In our obsolete list, and I put the obsolete list on the chat. This is what it looks like. It shows every area and the feature, when it becomes obsolete, and when we plan to remove it. Note that when it goes obsolete, we just start showing the name of it with the word obsolete next to it, so you know that that's one that there's a replacement for, and you should use the alternative. As you apply these updates, you should also, the suggested replacement should be in the text of that item, so you can see what you should be using instead, and you can also see it here on our page. So one that we've just recently decided, and I don't think is in that obsolete list yet, is the POP email triggers. We currently support POP and IMAP, and starting in 120, we're going to call POP obsolete. IMAP is really a much better way to go, more efficient, and as far as I know, most the mail services offer IMAP, so we're letting POP fall away, and so that'll be removed in 122, which is probably it's certainly several releases down the line, and gives you plenty of time to change if you're currently using the POP trigger. And the last thing that I would note is just a little promo for Campfire that Bogdan mentioned. We get together this on Fridays, this same hour, 10 a.m. Central Time. And it's a great opportunity to talk with your peers, meet your peers, learn about the product, pose questions, solutions. So it's really a great opportunity, and I enjoy hosting that every Friday. This week, we're going to talk about the opportunities that we're hoping to present you with to influence the next generation of low coders. So it's kind of a place to both give back and then maybe gain access to some low coders if you need new people in your organization. So it's a win-win, and we hope we'll be talking about that on Friday. With that, I am going to ask Patrick to come on, share, and start us into payment providers. These are features that have long been in the product. We have several of them. We'll talk about that as we go along, but he's going to focus in on one of them and show how easy it is to integrate, get money coming your way.
Great, thanks, Dale. Let me share my screen first, and sorry, let me just get a drink of water here. Okay. Am I sharing the
Sandbox?
Create a sandbox. Okay, good. Okay, so I think I have an ambitious set of things to accomplish here. So let me jump in. But basically, what I want to do is kind of start from scratch here and show you what you how you can set this up. And in a loose way, these will apply to our different providers. So I'm just going to set up an authorized.net sandbox account here. So let me just go through that here. And choose United States here, and I'm going to choose, I'll go ahead and use that email address. Okay, and I'm just going to change it slightly because it does have an existing account already. It's not letting me, oh, that's the login ID, okay. So all right, and I've got to put in, oh, here we go. Okay, so for this, I'm just going to, it doesn't really matter here, but I'm just going to choose freelance and individual contributor, and then just make up something. So I'm going to call this LCC 82, oops, 82 demo, and we'll choose US dollars, not Swiss franc, US dollars for our Sandbox currency. And I'm just going to choose something here that I know I'll remember.
So you've mentioned a couple of things. Our other, we're focusing in today on Authorized.net, but we have PayPal and Stripe integrations, and they'll be similar. And then a couple of words on Sandbox for anybody who doesn't understand where you're going. You're trying to get past the form, I see.
Yeah, evidently. That's okay if this doesn't work, but I don't see why it shouldn't. I'll just use my backup account. I'm not sure what it wants here, so I'll just use it. I'll use my existing account if I'm not able to do this.
If you just scroll up there one more time, it says what the login account. Keep going. I'm sorry. Login ID has too many simple patterns in it.
Oh, okay. Well, that's interesting.
Put a $sign.
I can't imagine why I would want that in there, but is there any requirements here? It doesn't say that there is.
8 and 20 letters and numbers, but it's too simple a pattern. I love it.
Oh, I guess it let me do that. Okay, interesting. Okay, so once you have your account, and hopefully yours is easier to create than mine was, these are very important values here that you want to capture. So I'm going to capture this, and you're seeing this on the screen, but that's okay because this is just a test account, and I'll get rid of it when I need to, but I'm just going to capture that on another screen here so I have it. Actually, I think the best thing for me to do is if I just copy all of that and then paste it in the file, then I can keep track of what the numbers actually are.
So correct me if I'm wrong. The Sandbox account is just an opportunity to completely set up your payment without actually working with money.
That's correct.
It's hard to work with money and collecting and whatever. You don't want to actually have a transaction. So Sandbox is complete insulation from money, and yet you get to fully test how to do.
That's correct. Yep. Okay, so now I have my API credentials, and these are going to be important a little bit later. The next thing I want to show you is that for Authorized.net, and I'm sure the other providers have similar things like that, but there's a guide for testing here. And this page I'm going to be referring back to later in the call, but you can see that we have different types of test card numbers here. So we have several card numbers for Visa, several MasterCards. We have an American Express card number, and these are the card numbers we need to use in the testing. And then down here, there's different criteria for getting different error codes back. And this is excellent for setting up your application so that you can handle all these different scenarios. I will say ahead of time today, we're not going to, by any means, create a situation where we're handling all these, because that would take, it's definitely more than an hour. But we're just going to, we're going to handle an approved transaction and a declined transaction. And if we have time, we might, maybe we'll handle where the zip code doesn't match or something like that. Now, some of these are a little bit, so if you want to get a CVV responses that if you can use 901, I happen to know that actually you don't have to use in order to get the transaction to go through, you don't have to use 900. You can just use any CVV. But if you specifically want to get a response where the CVV is not matching, then you can use 901 as the CVV that you pass into the transaction. And then there's some partial authorization responses. And then when you're going to deal with checks, e-checks, you put in specific amounts to get different responses back. We're not going to go into this too much. We're going to mostly just deal with successful checking transactions, but we'll try to look at a declined credit transaction. Okay, so then let's jump right along here. And so I have an application where I currently create a quote for a client. So let me just show you that. Go to entities and let's just go to quote. And so here I can say new, and I can add a quote for a client. So I'm just gonna, this is the same thing that I just typed already in my previous one, but I'm just gonna add another one. And I'll choose from my available clients here. So I'm gonna choose this one here, and we're going to say this is going to cost $400. And I'll add that quote in. And so now you can see I have another quote in the system here. And this is also sending the quote to the user. So what I want to do is first create a workflow that will allow payment of the amount that's being quoted, and then and do an update to the quote showing that that it's been paid. So let me go back to configuration here. So the first thing I want to do is add some, I'm going to add a little bit of some additional information to the quote entity. So let me edit the quote entity and go to properties. And I'm going to add a GUID. And the reason I'm doing that is because when I send a link for the payment, I'm going to put the GUID for the quote into the link so that
which is just a very long, unique number.
Yes, right. Yeah,
So,
yeah. Just a unique number, so that I'm not actually putting the quote ID in the link that somebody's following. Okay, and let me just check here to make sure if there was anything else I wanted to add before I move along. Sorry, my controls for the Zoom are in my way here. There we go. Okay, and also I'm going to leave that as text, and I'm also going to add a property for paid. And that is, of course, going to be a Boolean. So once the quote's been paid, we'll record that's been paid. Okay, save. Now I'm also going to quickly add a new entity. And the reasoning here is that, so I have, my quotes are connected to clients, but what I want to do is add an entity to, in the event that because this often happens that the person actually paying for is not the same person as the client, I'm going to add an entity to record the billing contact. So go in here and add this, and we'll accept all that. And then I'm going to put this under quotes and continue. And here, just going to add a few basic properties. And finally, zip code. The zip code is going to be the most important one for us because you need to often pass in a zip code for credit transactions. That's part of the confirmation with a credit transaction. Okay, so let me just assign a few different property types here. We'll make this an email, and I think I'm going to keep all the other ones as they are. Okay, and we'll put the email as the display name for this, and I'll go ahead and save that. Okay. And then finally, I do want to go back real quick and edit the quote. And I'm just going to connect it up to the billing contact that I just created. Okay, save that. And now I'm going to, next, let me just check my order of events here I want to follow. Okay, so I do want to create a token here. So I'm going to, and this is going to be used a little bit later. So I'm going to, oops, add the namespace called quotes. I'm going to add a token here, and let me just confirm real quick what I call this here. And this is going to help me easily convert my GUID that I'm sending in my link back to a quote. So I'm going to call this quote by GUID. And we'll make this a query here. Okay. And we'll save that the way it is there. Oh, let me just put I'm just gonna put as the default here title. It would default automatically to the ID of the record, but I'm going to put in a title here just to have the ability to get the title of the quote easily. Okay, so let's save that. And now I'm going to start working on our workflow. So this is going to be the workflow that's going to actually process the payment. So now we're getting down to the nitty-gritty of the payment. So I'll do new workflow here, and I'll go ahead and accept that namespace. And first, I'm going to add. Well, I'm gonna let me just step back a second and look at the input. So I'm gonna have a lot of input for this, but bear with me on this because I think you'll see where it's going as we go along here. And this is going to actually read the quote. So by doing this, I'll be able to get all the quote data just by passing in the quote ID. Hopefully everybody's aware of this feature right here, because you can use this instead of doing a read entity action within the process. All right, now I'm going to just add quite a few parameters here. The payment type is going to be whether it's a credit or a checking transaction. And so you'll see as I'm going through here that I'm going to have parameters that are related to both credit and checking transactions. So I'm going to deal with those both in the same workflow.
Of course, the nice thing about having this as a workflow is that you can call it from anywhere, whether it's an API or right in your form. This workflow will, you call it with all these parameters, you're going to end up with a call made to your payment processor.
Yep. And of course, also because I'm going to be using the API keys that that you saw me get earlier when I created my Sandbox account. Because I'm using those API keys, I will not have to re-enter those every time I want to do a process a transaction. They'll just be in the workflow, and all I have to do is call the workflow and pass the parameters you see here in. Now, I'm leaving everything as text, and that's been working just fine. So we'll leave it like that, and we'll move on to the process. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find my the billing contact that's associated with the quote that I'm passing in. So my by connecting that parameter that I passed in to the quote entity, I now have access to all the properties of the quote entity just by using this this syntax right here. The namespace is quote, and the property is billing contact, and that's the record ID of the billing contact that I want to have access to during the workflow. And I'm just going to put that into a token called billing contact. And so now for the rest of the workflow, I'll have access to all the properties of the billing contact by doing billing contact : and the property that I want. So let's save that like that. So now I'll go ahead and create a split here. And here's where we're going to determine whether we're doing a check transaction or a credit transaction. So I'm going to go here, and the first one I'm going to do is make a payment with electronic check. So you can see I have my authorized actions in here. And by the way, I didn't touch on this, and I meant to earlier, so let me just pause a moment. I already have the authorized.net add-on installed here, but if you don't in your instance, you would go to updates, and I'll show this as soon as I save this workflow, but you go to updates and then go to the third tab, which is called add-ons, I believe. Yep. And you just look there for the authorized.net add-on, and you install it from there. So make a payment with electronic check is my first one I want to do here. And here I want to go and grab the first thing I'm going to do is go back to where I saved my information, and this is where I'm going to put in those values that you saw me save earlier when I created my Sandbox account. So that was the API login ID, and here is my transaction key. Okay, so now let me touch base on this one right here. So we have this property in here. I'm going to leave this unchecked because I'm working with a sandbox. Once you had everything working the way you could transition to using this in a live way simply by going back to your actions and checking the go live option here. So I'm going to stick with the sandbox and leave that the way it is. But I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that. All right, so now I'm just going to copy and paste my tokens over here. We're going to choose US dollar here. Passing in the amount. And of course, I'm copying and pasting these because I just want to make sure that everything's going to.
Sure, but all those link
good.
back to the inputs that you got into this workflow.
Yep, exactly. Yep. Okay, so I'm going to choose for this one the web internet initiated entry. These other options here, some of them are really associated with doing live transactions with an actual person. But for this one, I'm just going to choose the web initiated entry, and we don't need bank check number. That doesn't apply in this scenario when we're doing a web entry. So here I'm going to start accessing those billing contact tokens that I mentioned when I did the read billing contact. So I'll just go ahead and put these in here, but a lot of this isn't really necessary for the transaction, but I'm just going to put them in here just so we have them. And the zip code is one that we need. Okay. Now, we have to output so we have all these outputs here for the response that we get back from Authorized. So I'm going to put in tokens here so that I can then put these into the output of the workflow and also use them later in the workflow. Okay. I can use these, and this could be very useful. I'm not going to use them today because I'm going to do some other things in the workflow. But so there's you could maybe as an example, you could record a record if a transaction was declined so that you know that happened. So there's some things that you could do here automatically, but I'm just going to use my tokens here that I'm outputting to do some things later in the workflow. So I'm going to leave these the way they are. And I think we're done. I will save that the way it is. And I'm just going to drag this out just a little bit. And I'm going to put in my condition here for the e-check. So the input here that I have is payment type. And if I'm passing in the value e-check, then we're going to make a payment with electronic check. Okay, so now let me go back to my decision point here. And we're going to go back to the authorized.net actions and make a payment with credit card is the other one we're going to do. And so I apologize that there's going to be some repetition here, but that is the nature of what we do, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's actually perfect that we have, again, the benefit of doing this in a workflow that you can fork and have all the complexity into a workflow and then just call it appropriately.
Yep. Let me go back to my okay, so there are just like for the checking transactions, there are some different types of transactions here. The most common one, and I meant to do a little disclaimer at the beginning when I first started talking about it. I didn't do a disclaimer. I am not an expert on online transactions or credit transactions, checking transactions. I'm showing you this implementation here, and one of the things I learned is that the authorization and capture type transaction is the most common one that you're going to do. Some of these other ones have different purposes, like if you were in a restaurant and you know, when you make a purchase in a restaurant, they do an authorization and then bring it back to you, so they know that the funds are there, but then they bring it back to you for you to add a tip on. So that's the type of thing, you know, an example of what some of these other types would be used for. But I'm going to use the auth capture type, which does an authorization and then actually processes the amount right away.
Captures your money.
Yes. Okay, and once again, we have the go live, and we're not going to check that right now. And then I'm going to use some of the same tokens that I had already. And of course, the transaction is going to be in US dollar. And you're going to use the same token for the amount to pay, but here's where we're going to vary from the tokens that we were using in the previous one. So here I'm going to put my card number token in as the card number, and the CVV token for the CVV, and expiration month. Expiration year. You can't see this, but on my, oh, it's happening here too. This keeps popping up every time, and I don't know, it wasn't doing that earlier, but now all of a sudden it's decided that it's going to.
It thinks you're dealing with trying to fill in a form for you.
Yeah. Oh, I did okay, I'll just put this one here. And get that last name token here. And so actually, I'm realizing that I have a little bit of an issue here, because I should be using the billing contact tokens here, and I didn't realize that I had, so let me just do that real quick here. Make sure that's wrapped. Okay, and then we have the same output tokens. So I'm making sure, this is important, I'm making sure that my output tokens here match the output tokens that I used in my other actions, so that my downstack actions can will be able to have some commonality, so I don't have to do separate downstack actions for the checking and the
when they come back
and
together.
the credit transactions. Yep. Okay, and same story that I said here before. I'm going to use these output tokens to do some stuff down the stack here. So we'll save that the way it is now. Alrighty, and now I'm going to do a merge here. And oh, here's an important one. I need to make sure I put in my condition for choosing this option here in my flow. And just connect that back to the merge. And I'm going to send an email. And for the send email, I'm only going to be sending an email if the transaction is successful. So it's authorized and gets processed. And that is, I know the response code for that is 1 because I did some testing and know that's what I'm expecting back if it's successful. So if the response is 1, then I'm going to send an email to the billing contact email, and I'll put some, I'll make the subject line a little bit customized there. And then let me grab the content of the email here. And I'll put that in here. So we'll just say that we received your payment for the quote number and the quote title for the amount, and here's the transaction ID. So I'm using that the transaction ID from the one of those 2 actions that processed a payment. Okay, and I was very ambitious in all the thinking about what I was going to do today, and I wanted to actually send a a payment attachment also, but we're not going to get to that today. But just so you know, that's another option. You could, of course, have a file generated that you attach to the email here as well. But for now, we'll just send this email and click save here. And now I'm looking at the time, and I realize that we might be running out of time. Hopefully, we'll at least have time to run this workflow and see that work. So the other thing I want to do here is a partial update of the quote to show that the payment was successful. And of course, that's going to use that same response as the condition. So if we're successful, then we're going to we're going to do an update of the quote, and we're going to change the paid Boolean property to true.
Perfect.
Save that, and that is the end of our workflow. And now go to output, and of course I have some output I want here, and that is those tokens that we have. So
the caller can do anything it wants to respond to the transactions.
Yeah.
So.
And the trans ID. And I'll just do them exactly the same way. Oops. Sorry. There we go. Okay, auth code. And auth code.
Love that Windows fee.
Yeah, reason text and reason code and the response. All right, let's save this, and we'll call it alrighty. Now let's just go back here and take a look at the quotes. So now I'm going to, so by the way, my quotes are connected to clients. So I just want to show you that, I do have a few clients in the system here. So Let's choose Toby. So that's the one that has the dot after, right before training, and go back to quotes, and we'll do a new quote. And I'm just going to copy that same information in here. Sorry, I'm not being more creative here with my so that's Toby there. We'll say that we're going to give him an inexpensive website, and I will tell you why in a minute. The GUID, so here's an improvement I could do that I haven't done yet. I certainly should hide this from the forum, because this is, and actually that's, I can't remember if I did this on this form or not. I didn't. So hold on, let me just make a change here. So go to the quote form and go to GUID, and I'm going to actually just get rid of the GUID field here, and we're going to go down to the add button here and go to the create new quote, and for the GUID, I'm going to replace the field token with the token that creates a GUID. So that's GUID, ID : new. So this will this token is one of the core tokens, and will automatically create a new GUID for me for this.
And it's a nice big random number. So
yes, yep. Okay, so let me save that. And actually, before I save that, I don't need this either. So it gets rid of that, and we'll just remove that token there. It's not required, so. And that's better. All right, save that. Load new. And this actually shouldn't be in here either, so I'll leave that blank for now. Okay, and click add. Okay. I should have seen that coming. Go here and create new quote. So it's a Boolean, so it wants something, so we'll give it something. Right.
Testing and debugging, always important. Yeah. You're getting heckled a little bit. Ben says I before E, except after C.
Oh, where did I do that? That's a common one for me. Yeah. I'm not surprised.
Always, what do you do first?
All right. All right, there we go. So we have this in here now. I would also probably remove this from this grid as well.
Proves it out, so it's a good demonstration here.
Yep. Okay, so this I'm not going to use yet. I actually, because we are right at time, maybe I can continue. What I can do is do the full implementation on our Campfire site, but what I want to do right now is that I have an ID 3. So let's go to the workflow, and let's run a test on this workflow. So we're going to make a payment on the quote 3, and we'll do credit first. And in my full implementation that I wanted to do, I would be passing in the quote title, the quote title, and the quote ID and the company name, I think is what I had planned to put in there, and that's just coming in from the form.
Sure. Here, we'll run it interactively. We'll prove that it works or rejects or whatever.
And unless we want to do something specifically with the CCV, then this doesn't need to have a this can be any value unless we want to use one of the specific ones. So, and then this just has to be a future date for the testing purposes. So we'll just do 042025 as our expiration date, and then card number. That is important. So let me go back to my testing guide and go up to my list of card numbers, and I'm going to grab this Visa card number here and go back to here and put my card number in. Okay, that looks good. And run this transaction. Okay, yeah, that's fine.
Didn't send the mail, but we probably
Yeah.
got a nice output.
Yep.
Why don't we just, yeah. I was going to say false that email just so we can
Yeah.
see something process. And you're good. We've got 5 minutes. No problem.
Yep, that's okay. Yep. Let me just this is my unique way of doing the faults. I know there's plenty of other options, but it's just the one that I've done for years and I like it.
And one never does equal two, so it's
that it works. All right, let's save and test this again. And the quote ID is 3. Okay, 042025. And we're skipping all the checking related stuff. And let me just make sure I get to, yep, that is still the top of the clipboard. And let's try that again. Oh, so interesting. I guess I'm getting this response code because it's seeing that another transaction just happened that
just
matches
did it.
this. Yeah.
Hey, so that proves it works.
Yeah, and then just to wrap this slightly, let me go over here and I just want to show you. Oh, here we go. Yep. And we put this into a new window and drag this over. So this was a an email that I got from
Authorized.
Yeah, from Authorized, just showing me that. So this is the email address that I used to create the Sandbox account, and it's just showing me that that it was an authorization in capture and that it was approved, and giving me the authorization code and the transaction ID. And this information right here, the response, the authorization code and the transaction ID would have been in my output parameters here if the email action hadn't caused an issue.
Yep. So we are very close to time. There was one question, and I'm going to start with Patrick has already said that he's not an expert, so we may not know this, but Mark asks about whether or not the site has to be PCI compliant to use these actions. Do you know anything about that?
I don't. I see Bogdan's coming in. Maybe he has some thoughts on that.
I'm not an expert as well, but what I know is that if you are storing the information in the database, you have to be PCI compliant.
Yes, and I want to make sure that I point that out, is that in everything I did here, we're not actually storing payment information. I'm storing contact information, but if you notice, I didn't actually store any payment information because that's something that that I think you really need to think through seriously before you start storing payment information. So our payment information is going directly to authorized.net in this implementation I did.
Yes.
So check with legal counsel, but we can take steps not to store it and run the action on our site. That's the hope.
Yeah. I think there is a simplified procedure if you are not storing payment information. Okay. Even like a self-assessment form, something like that, it's called.
But this is an open topic, and you definitely wanted to verify before you head down the path. Mark is reminding us it's. Mark has a different opinion about where we type it and things like that. So it's important to have that right. But we offer the service if it works for you, authorized.net and some of these other actions. Cool. All right. Very nice. Prove that it worked. It's always easier to do it when a bunch of people aren't watching, but you got it to work. So perfect.
Great. I think it was very, very good content. Thanks a lot, Patrick and Dale, for putting it in place. Yeah, payment, integrating payment used to be so complicated 10, 15 years ago, and nowadays it's so easy. And there are services that make it even more easier than Authorized.net. It's so easy to get money, then it frees more time to focus on getting the customers to pay. So thank you all for being here, and I'll see you all on Friday or next week at the Café.